Have you ever felt a strange change in your body and wondered it was a silent warning? As we grow older, it's natural to brush off small changes as just part of aging. What if I told you these strange changes in your body aren't just signs of aging, but clear warnings that you will develop Parkinson's disease? In this video, we're uncovering 5 specific signs that strongly suggest you could develop Parkinson's after the age of 80. And while that might sound alarming, knowing what to watch for now can be the key to catching things early and staying ahead of what's coming. Each of these signs has been recognized by doctors and neurologists as possible early predictors of Parkinson's, sometimes showing up years, even decades before a diagnosis. From the way you move your arms to the way you speak or smell, these changes are your body's quiet way of asking for attention. So stay with us until the end, because what you learn today might not only bring clarity about your own health, but also help you spot the signs in someone you love. You'll walk away with real insight, a renewed sense of control, and perhaps even a new perspective on what your body's been trying to tell you all along. Let's begin. Sign 1, loss of smell. One of the earliest and most surprising signs that your body may be preparing for Parkinson's is a sudden or gradual loss of your sense of smell. Now, we're not talking about catching a cold or having allergies. This is when familiar scents, like your morning coffee, a garden rose, or even your favorite cologne, start to fade without any explanation. And you might not notice it right away. Many older adults chalk this up to normal, aging, or simply assume their nose isn't what it used to be. But the truth is, this specific sensory change may be more important than you think. Neurologists have found that diminished smell can be one of the very first changes in the brain, before any other physical symptoms of Parkinson's appear. This happens because Parkinson's doesn't just affect movement. It begins by targeting areas deep in the brain that handle sensory processing, particularly the olfactory bulb, which manages your ability to detect and identify smells. This damage can start years, even decades, before the tremors or stiffness begin to show up. Here's what's interesting: many seniors who later develop Parkinson's often recall, in hindsight, that they stopped smelling things clearly, long before they felt anything else was wrong. They might remember that food started tasting blander, or that they couldn't pick up the scent of flowers like they used to. At the time, they didn't think much of it, but looking back, it was one of their body's first ways of whispering, "Pay attention." Let's take an example. Robert, a 74-year-old retired teacher from Ohio, began noticing that he couldn't smell his wife's cooking like he used to. He blamed it on aging or maybe a mild sinus infection. But over time, the loss persisted. Years later, when he was finally diagnosed with Parkinson's, that faded sense of smell made perfect sense in retrospect. It had been the first domino to fall. What makes this sign especially tricky is that it doesn't feel urgent. No pain, no obvious dysfunction, just a quiet, gradual shift that's easy to ignore. But that's exactly why it matters. Parkinson's is a slow-moving condition, and it often gives us subtle warnings long before it interferes with our daily lives. The more we recognize these early cues, the better chance we have at preparing, adapting, and possibly even slowing its progression. So if you've recently found yourself struggling to enjoy the scent of food, flowers, or everyday aromas, especially if this change came on without a cold or allergy, pay attention. It may not mean Parkinson's is guaranteed, but it does mean your nervous system could be changing in ways worth exploring further. Recognizing these subtle signs doesn't just protect your future. It empowers you to be proactive now. And for many seniors, that awareness alone can make all the difference. Sign 2, persistent constipation. Another often overlooked sign that your body may be preparing for Parkinson's is persistent constipation. Now, occasional constipation happens to most people at some point. But when it becomes a regular pattern, despite eating a balanced diet, staying hydrated and moving your body, it's time to pay closer attention. What many don't realize is that Parkinson's disease doesn't begin in the hands or legs. In many cases, it begins in the gut. Doctors and neurologists now believe that the earliest stages of Parkinson's can start in the digestive tract. That's because the same nerve cells that affect movement in your brain also help control your digestive system. When those nerves begin to slow down or stop working properly, it can disrupt the muscles in your intestines. This leads to slower movement of food and waste, causing chronic constipation that doesn't respond to the usual fixes. But the changes don't stop there. The gut is sometimes called the second brain for a reason. It's filled with nerve endings that communicate with your brain through the vagus nerve. When this pathway becomes impaired due to early Parkinson's, it can lead to a whole range of digestive symptoms. Constipation is often the first and most noticeable of them. Let me share an example. Harold, a 78-year-old veteran from Arizona, began noticing that he needed laxatives more and more often. At first, he blamed it on dehydration or getting less exercise. But even after making changes, nothing improved. A few years later, when his hands began to tremble and he struggled with balance, his doctor confirmed a Parkinson's diagnosis. Looking back, Harold remembered his gut symptoms as the first sign that something wasn't quite right. What makes this so important is that people tend to suffer in silence. Digestive issues, especially ones like constipation, aren't always easy to talk about. But ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away. It only delays the chance to catch a much bigger issue in its earliest phase. The more we talk openly about these changes, the better we can understand what our bodies are trying to say. The mind-gut connection is real. And when your gut slows down for reasons that seem unexplained, it could be a quiet warning sign that your nervous system is under stress. Even if you haven't experienced any tremors, stiffness, or slowness in movement, your digestive system might already be sending up a flare. So if you've been dealing with frequent constipation, especially if it's been getting worse or not improving with simple lifestyle changes, consider it a reason to take a closer look. It's not just about digestion, it's about the overall health of your nervous system. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Sign 3, changes in handwriting. One subtle but meaningful sign that Parkinson's might be developing in your body is a noticeable change in your handwriting. Now, handwriting isn't something most of us think much about. It's automatic, personal, something we've done the same way for decades. But if you find that your writing has suddenly become smaller, cramped, or more difficult to control, it may be more than just stiff fingers or aging joints. It could be a neurological signal that your fine motor skills are being affected. This condition, often called micrographia, is one of the early motor symptoms doctors look for when evaluating someone for Parkinson's disease. Micrographia refers to a progressive shrinking or tightening of your handwriting, especially as you write across a page. You might start out writing normally, only to find your letters getting smaller, more crowded, or harder to read as you continue. This can be frustrating and confusing because you haven't changed your pen, your posture, or your effort. And yet something about the way your hand moves just doesn't feel the same. What's actually happening is deeper than your wrist or fingers. Parkinson's affects the part of the brain that coordinates smooth, controlled muscle movement. When those brain signals become slower or less efficient, tasks that require precision, like handwriting, can begin to change. This often happens before more obvious signs, like tremors or muscle stiffness appear. That's why it's considered such a telling early symptom. Let's look at an example. James, an 81-year-old retired accountant from Illinois, had always prided himself on his neat penmanship. But one day, he noticed that his signature on a birthday card looked smaller than usual. Over the next few months, it became harder to fill out forms or write a grocery list. His letters bunched together, and he had to concentrate much harder than before. Eventually, his doctor pointed out that this change was likely linked to Parkinson's years before any tremors showed up. It's important to note that not all changes in handwriting are cause for alarm. Arthritis, vision changes, or even holding your pen differently can affect how you write. But when the change feels unnatural, persistent, and increasingly difficult to control, especially if it happens without pain, it may be worth a second look. What makes this symptom especially powerful is that it often shows up during quiet moments. Writing a note, signing a check, making a list. These aren't big events, but they reveal something important, how well the brain and muscles are communicating. When that process begins to shift, it's your body's way of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, something's changing. If you've noticed a change in your handwriting, especially one that's gradually gotten smaller, more cramped or harder to read, it's worth mentioning to your doctor. Even if it feels minor, it could be part of a larger pattern your nervous system is trying to show you. And when it comes to Parkinson's, seeing the early signs can make a big difference in how prepared and supported you feel. It's not about jumping to conclusions. It's about listening closely to what your body is trying to tell you before the message gets louder. Sign 4, reduced arm swing while walking. One of the most physically visible signs that Parkinson's may be quietly developing is a reduced arm swing while you walk. Now that may sound like a small detail, something most people wouldn't even notice. But for doctors who study movement disorders, it's often one of the earliest outward signs of a neurological shift. If you or someone close to you starts walking with one arm swinging less than the other, or hardly at all, it could be a signal worth paying close attention to. Walking is a coordinated effort. It might feel automatic, but your brain and body are constantly working together to keep your steps balanced and natural. When one arm suddenly stops swinging the way it used to, it often means that part of the body's motor system is starting to stiffen. That stiffness or rigidity can be a direct result of early Parkinson's affecting the muscles and nerves on one side of the body. In many cases, this reduced swing is not painful. You might not even be fully aware it's happening. A spouse or friend might point it out before you ever feel it yourself. They might say, "Hey, are you okay? I noticed your right arm doesn't move when you walk." And that simple comment might be the first step toward recognizing that something deeper could be going on. Let me give you an example. Barbara, a 76-year-old grandmother from Oregon, always enjoyed her morning walks around the neighborhood. One day, her daughter noticed something odd. Barbara's left arm stayed stiff at her side while her right arm swung naturally. Barbara hadn't noticed it herself, but once it was pointed out, she began to feel that her left side was just a little slower, a little tighter. Within a year, she was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. Looking back, that frozen arm swing was the first real signal. This kind of movement change doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in gradually, which is why it's so often missed. You might start walking a little slower. Maybe your gait feels less fluid. Over time, the reduced swing might be joined by other signs, like dragging a foot slightly or feeling like your stride is shorter. But it all begins with that one arm that doesn't quite keep up with the rest of your body. From a neurological standpoint, this happens because Parkinson's affects dopamine production in the brain, and dopamine is what allows your muscles to move smoothly and in coordination. Without enough of it, certain muscles become stiff, even if you're not consciously aware of the tension. The muscles in your arm and shoulder are just as affected as those in your legs. And since walking involves both, the signs often show up in your stride first. What makes this sign especially important is that it's visible, not just to doctors, but to you and your loved ones. You don't need special tests or equipment to see it. All it takes is awareness and a willingness to look at the small changes in your day-to-day movements. Your body knows how it used to move, and when something changes that rhythm, it's worth noticing. So if you've caught yourself walking with one arm stiff by your side, or if someone has pointed out to you, don't ignore it. It may seem minor, but it could be your nervous system's first outward expression of an internal shift. The earlier you catch these changes, the better prepared you'll be to manage what comes next. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Sign 5, soft or slurred speech. Another subtle yet telling sign that Parkinson's may be developing in your body is a soft, slurred, or slightly hoarse voice that gradually changes over time. This isn't the kind of voice change that happens when you catch a cold or yell at a ball game. It's the kind that sneaks in slowly, almost quietly. One day you might notice that people are asking you to repeat yourself more often. Or maybe your voice doesn't carry like it used to, even though you feel like you're speaking normally. These changes, while easy to overlook, can be your nervous system's early warning that something deeper is happening. Parkinson's affects the brain's ability to send signals to the muscles that control speech, including those in the throat, mouth, and even the diaphragm. When those signals become weaker or delayed, your voice may lose volume, clarity, or strength. This can result in speech that sounds muffled, strained, or overly quiet, even if you're putting in the same effort you always have. At first, this change might feel like a minor nuisance. You might assume it's just part of aging or maybe dry air affecting your throat. But if the softness or slurring becomes consistent, especially in calm settings where you used to be heard clearly, it deserves a closer look. Many people who develop Parkinson's later on realize that their speech changed long before any shaking or stiffness ever appeared. Let me share an example. Charles, an 80-year-old former choir member from Virginia, began noticing that during conversations at church, people leaned in closer and often said, "I'm sorry, what was that?" At first, he thought they just couldn't hear well, but then he realized he had stopped projecting his voice the way he used to. Even his wife mentioned that their evening chats were becoming harder to follow. It wasn't until Charles saw a neurologist that he connected the dots. The shift in his speech had been one of the first indicators of early Parkinson's. What makes this symptom particularly meaningful is how it affects your connection with others. Speech is how we express ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, our personality. When your voice changes, it can feel like you're losing a piece of that connection. Some people even begin speaking less, not because they have nothing to say, but because they grow frustrated by how often they're misunderstood. That emotional toll matters. Parkinson's doesn't just impact the body, it can shape how people see themselves. A soft voice can lead to self-doubt or even withdrawal from social situations. And when someone feels like they're fading into the background, it only makes the changes harder to cope with. But the good news is, noticing this sign early means you have options. Speech therapy, voice exercises, and even posture adjustments can help preserve and improve your ability to communicate. And perhaps more importantly, being aware of this change helps you recognize that it's not your fault. It's your nervous system asking for support. If your voice has become quieter, more hoarse, or less distinct over time, and this change isn't linked to a cold, allergies, or a temporary condition, take it seriously. It may not feel urgent, but it's a sign worth listening to. Sometimes our voice tells the story of what's happening inside, even before the rest of the body speaks up. Final thoughts, certain differentius. As we wrap up this video, take a quiet moment to reflect on the signs we've discussed. What stood out to you the most? Was it the loss of smell that you brushed off as just part of getting older? Or maybe the slower arm swing during your morning walk? Sometimes the very signs we think are harmless quirks of aging are actually our body's early whispers of something deeper. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. Each of these signs on their own might seem small, but when viewed together, they begin to tell a story your nervous system has been quietly writing for years. And the sooner we learn to read that story, the better chance we have to respond with strength, support, and grace. Parkinson's can feel like a scary word, but knowledge is the first light we shine on fear. And what you've learned today doesn't just help you, it helps you look out for your spouse, your siblings, your friends, even your neighbors. Because early recognition leads to earlier care, better planning, and a greater sense of control over the road ahead. Let me remind you, experiencing one or two of these signs doesn't mean you have Parkinson's, but they are signals worth bringing up with your doctor, especially if they've been persistent or have begun to affect your daily rhythm. You know your body better than anyone else. And if something feels different, if something feels off, trust that instinct. The most powerful thing we can do as we age is listen closely to what our body's trying to tell us. Not with panic, but with curiosity. Not with denial, but with attention. And not with despair, but with the confidence that we are never too old to take action, to get support, and to stay ahead of what's coming. You deserve to move through the years ahead with clarity, confidence, in the care you need. Recognizing these early signs is just one small but important step in doing that, because you are not alone. And the more we share, the more we learn, the stronger we all become. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.